actually you can push through the impossible. Palash Soni would know. He's the co-founder and CEO of Goldcast, helping B2B marketers engage their audiences and repurpose virtual event content, and a lot more. But beyond what he's doing at Goldcast, it's actually how Palash's journey has unfolded that is going to leave you inspired. I know it has for me. His story is one of relentless bravery and determination. From his days in India, dreaming of startups long before the ecosystem even existed there, to moving to the US to attend, Harvard, no big deal, just Harvard Business School. He faced challenge after challenge, leaving behind a thriving career, his wife leaving behind a thriving career, uprooting their lives, and not only navigating visa hurdles and personal sacrifices, but also some pretty crushing doubt of a hyper-competitive market. Yet, against all odds and often against conventional advice, Palash forged ahead. So this isn't a story about building a company. It's a story of resilience. How Palash made bold decisions, pivoted in the face of a shifting, crazy market, and proving time and time again that no obstacle is too great when paired with vision and grit. I'm Lindsay Chepkema, and this is Actually I Can. Hi, Palash. How are you?
Very well, Lindsay.
Good. Well, I am so glad to have you here. We met, goodness, how many years ago was it? I was building when I was building at Casted, and you were building at Goldcast, and there were synergies, using that buzzword, and bumping up against each other a little bit. And it was just fun. It was cool to watch both of the companies grow and us try new things. And you have always been such a wonderful, friendly, great person to know in the space. And even when there was a little bit of competition, it was always just really fun to know you. And I'm so excited to talk with you now because I'm sure you've got some pretty cool stories to share. So welcome.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm excited.
Okay, so as we get into things, tell me a little bit about your founder journey. So this is a lot of these stories I don't know. I don't know this side of you. So tell me a little bit about starting Goldcast and kind of what got you into the founder lane.
Yes, I can. So my founder journey actually starts way back. So I did my undergrad in engineering, and I was very interested in startups. And this was late 2000s, early 2010s in India, when startups was not a thing in India. There was no VC ecosystem. There was nothing actually. And so I'd always been interested in startups since before it was cool back home. And I did my first actual attempt in 2015. So I was between jobs. I was working in manufacturing before, and then I had 3 months of gap between joining this other company. And that's where I tried my first startup. I worked on that for 9 months and realized I have no idea how to build a startup, run a startup. And
okay, nobody does.
Yeah, we spent almost $2,000 designing a logo, which is insane. And that was all spent from our pocket. So that was a sign for me when I looked back, I don't know anything.
Lessons learned.
Yeah. And after that, I joined this company called InMobi, which was an advertising technology company. And so I learned a lot about tech, B2B, all of that. And I came very close to attempting more startups when I was there. So I was at one point looking at some technology for daycares that can make the daycare experience better, because my sister had a kid and his daycare was horrible. So that and a bunch of other things. And then I realized that to really build a cutting edge software company, you have to be in the market, which is US. So this was around 2018 when I made the decision to do that I'll go to the US and start. And it's a very non-trivial exercise for immigrants, because there are lots of practical considerations. So I decided at that time to come for an MBA here. So this was, to put in context, I was already 6 years into a job. And typically people go into MBAs after 4 or 5 years, right? So I was a little bit late. And anyone who I told that, I'm going to go for an MBA and then start up, they were like, you are crazy, because MBA saddles you with so much debt. Also, people don't go do an MBA to start up.
Well, and also you didn't just go get any MBA. Can we just talk about where you got your MBA?
Yes. This was before I applied. So just to make the decision that we have to go.
Okay.
Was a
we'll get to that
non-trivial
then.
one. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Okay.
And so once I made the decision and everyone was against it at the time, I spoke with the CEO of the company, and he was also an MBA. He started the company, I think, a year after his MBA, and he did his MBA from here in Boston at Harvard Business School. So he was like, "Yeah, it's a good idea." I was like, "Okay, if you think it's a good idea, I can go." And he wrote me a recommendation that definitely helped get into Harvard Business School. So.
Okay, so no big.
Yes.
You were like, I'm going to go get an MBA. Why not just go to Harvard? That seems like the best path. Which, I mean, obviously that's incredible. That's not a small thing. Okay, so you make the decision. Sounds like it was not a popular decision by.
It was not
in mass, which is okay.
Yes.
You did it anyway. You said, actually, I can. And by the way, I'm not just going to go to the U.S. I'm not just going to go get my MBA. I'm going to go to the U.S. and get my MBA at Harvard. Okay, got it. So you're clearly an underachiever. Cool, got it. Okay, so you made the decision. You got into Harvard. Congratulations. That's incredible.
Thank you. So I got in, and then there was still a decision to be made that do you really want to go in, because my wife she had a great job back home. She was growing through the ranks, and for her also it was a non-trivial decision because she could not work here. So she was like, okay, if I'm going to take a break, then it better be clubbed with a maternity break. So we have to make a decision whether we are going to have kids. And by that time, I was always sort of putting off the decision, and so the decision came to like whether we want to have kids or not at all. And at that point, I was like, no, we want to definitely have kids. Maybe the time is not ideal, but let's do it. So we decided to do that while in the first year of MBA. So my kid was born in January of 2021. No, sorry, 2020. Jan of 2020.
Oh, great time to, have a baby. Better than March of 2020 or literally any time after that. Yes. Okay, cool. So small life changes. Yeah.
Yes, that was a big life change that I did not realize because it was just happening. Things were just happening.
Yeah.
And in that whole process of going to business school and then exploring the intention to start up, I met Kishore, my other co-founder, and he also wanted to start up, but he had never worked in tech, had no idea how all of this works. So he was looking for someone who knows this ecosystem. So we both came together naturally. We got along very well. And we did what people call like co-founder dating for 1 year, almost. Went through a host of ideas and explored things and got to know that we can work well together. And so, that around March of 2020, there was early inklings of COVID. So it wasn't clear that everything will get locked down. But before, in our like exploration phase, we had explored an idea for a CRM for events. And it was one of those ideas which come to people who have never done a real startup before. So
sometimes ignorance is bliss. It's where you can really get audacious.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we were quick to discard it after exploring it for a couple of weeks. But then when COVID hit, we were intrigued that maybe the digital events world has a space for something like this. So we started with that inquiry and then finally arrived at the idea for Goldcast, or what was a early like misformed idea of Goldcast. And then there was a lot that needed to be done to actually get into starting up after that. But I can talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me timeline here. 2018. When did you like make that decision that like, okay, I'm gonna go to the States, gonna get my MBA, gonna go to Harvard? That
2018, mid 2018. And that was the time when the applications were in full force. So I put in the application, got in, and made it to the US in August of 2019.
August 2019, you got here. Okay. And so then by January, you had, so like it's within a year-ish, you had left your home. And we're not just talking like, I just moved from Indiana to Boston and I'm acting like that's a big deal. You moved from India to Boston. Completely, I
Yes.
mean, new country. And like you bring your wife and she has a major life change because like you said, she had to leave her job and then you guys have a
Yeah.
baby and you're in business school and you're like thinking about starting a company. Like how were you? That's a lot. And then COVID.
Honestly,
I mean,
Lindsay,
just, because fun
yes.
times, icing on the cake. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, if I look back at all of it, it does sound reckless, look reckless. At that point in time, I was so laser focused on just getting started that I did not think too much about it. It was probably some kind of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, okay, you said that there were people, since we're talking like, actually, I can, you had some naysayers, you had some people that were like, don't do that. Tell me about that. Like, people told you not to go get your MBA. What else? What
Yes.
else did they tell you not to do, Palash?
Actually, a lot of people told me not to start up because if at this time, because now picture this is April, May of 2020. I had just completed 1 year of the 2 year of business school, and by the time from the time in March when we decided to get into this space or explore this space to actually having an idea, which is in May, this space became ultra hot, which you would know, right? Being in that
sure. Yeah.
in that zone.
Yep.
So now everyone was saying, okay, this is too competitive. You guys are students. You do not have a work visa. So I don't know how you actually work. No one was willing to give us capital. And everyone said that you do not have work permits. So we don't know if, like, we don't want to invest in students because you can always go and get a job. So you don't have enough skin in the game. And also, this is your first time in the US. But I think there was the bigger reason for all the investors was that they didn't think we could compete because there was no obvious reason for that. There were so many teams that had already raised 8 figures in capital by then.
Which is
so
insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is insane. That was unprecedented. And this was not before the market became good. So the consensus at that time was still that the economy is good. And so a lot of capital was going in the virtual event space. And we thought we had some unique thesis with our focus on the B2B marketers, but the fault lines were not clear to anyone. So we got so many rejections at that time, so many. And some of my friends were also like, yeah, just find something else. So there was a point in between when we said, we either have to drop out so that people have conviction that we can do it, or we just abandon the idea. And this was also like mid 2020 Republican government. So the immigration stuff is pretty hard. Everything is on a grinding halt. So we had this like 2-month period from May to August when we had to return to business school to decide that we are moving off, also convince a VC that we will be able to raise, or we should get capital and then get our visas in this 2-month space.
In 2 months.
So in 2 months, yes.
Okay.
So that was very challenging, and that was also almost a little depressing at the time because we didn't know how all of this would work. So I said that at that point I said that we have to just make the decision. So we had another third co-founder, Ashish, who was also my friend from business school. He had joined. So all 3 of us then sat together and said, let's give it a chance. The good thing with HBS is it allows you to come back for 5 years after leaving. So we had some cushion. So we said, okay, let's take a break. Let's move out and see how the world reacts to that. And if you're able to get capital, then we can probably pay a lawyer and maybe get a visa. So
maybe
that was the exploration that we did at the time. And unfortunately, all of that came to pass. Like, we had one investor who we got connected through a connection of a connection, very long connection, but also an HBS alum.
That's how it always works. Yep.
Yeah. And he decided to write us a $700,000 check at that time. And then once he wrote a check, then everyone else came together. We had a 1.5 million seed round, which I know how that, I know how that works.
You grind and you grind and you grind and you grind and
Yes.
you get one check, and then people are like, wait,
Yes.
I want to be in there too. And you're like,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yes.
Crazy. Woo-hoo. Okay.
So we got that.
Okay.
And then we also were able to use that term sheet to make a petition for this visa called an O1 visa, which is for entrepreneurs or PhDs.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 categories. So we were able to get that just like 3 days before the fee was due for the second year.
Oh my gosh. Oh my word. Okay. All right. So you've had a whirlwind. It's been what, two years at this point? How long has it been? What's the timeline here?
Since I decided to do it.
Yeah. Until what you just told me.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So you, and like I said, you are always like, you're always smiling. Like you're so positive. And I mean, the personal side of that, I mean, the massive life changes and, moving countries and starting business school and having a baby and like, that's huge, and starting a company. And then all of the added weight of dealing with like visas and BC. So again, tell me what was it about, like, what was it in you that just kept saying, yeah, no, I think we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep trying this thing. I believe that there's something here. Despite, you said people kind of along the way were like, I mean, maybe just like finish school, or maybe go back home, or maybe like, tell me what that was like. Like, what was that push-pull of like, maybe you shouldn't, and you're like, actually, I can.
Yeah, Lindsay, actually, the answer to that question is very, very founder fundamental type. So because I had come so close to evaluating and trying out a bunch of ideas that failed, I sort of retroed them and figured out that there was no real tailwind behind any of those ideas, and that's why they failed. So I came to believe that the market needs to be big and there needs to be an actual tailwind for a small company to get in and then rise to the level where it could actually become a real company. And I was very convinced that this is a tailwind. We were also convinced at the time that it is probably not as huge as investors are making it out, which also stomachs me a little bit that there's literally like $1 billion in funding going to some other companies.
I know.
Which was crazy. But we knew that this is a real tailwind. It will drive real behavior change in marketers, and this is our opportunity to get in. And no one was talking about what we were talking about doing. And I sort of knew that the horizontal play does not work forever. It might have worked for some categories like CRM or Workday, but that time has passed. And now it does not work. So we wanted to play the niche game, and I knew that it will, or at least I had conviction in my gut that it will work. So that's what kept us going. But the presence of tailwind, you would know as an entrepreneur, as a founder, that a real tailwind that you can latch on to, so hard to come by.
It is. And it changes. I mean, you're talking about tailwinds. The winds change, right?
Yes.
I mean, just look at the last few years. I mean, what was working and like unstoppable pre-COVID has like vaporized now. And then vice versa. Things that like no one ever would have thought had a chance in a million years. Look at the QR code. Those were dead. And now, that's has life again. And just look at what has happened as far as market shifts and audience behavior and where people are even working. I think as a founder, you've got to be so convicted about your gut and your intuition and willing to say, nope, I hear you, but I'm telling you this is what we're going to do, which is sometimes easier said than done.
Oh yeah, often. It's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah. Okay. So then that gets us to like 2021-ish. Yeah?
Yeah. Early 21 is when we launched the product actually in GA.
Okay. Yeah. So you were like, yep, actually we can. Actually we did. It's launched. What kind of, like, speaking of tailwinds, what kind of tailwinds or headwinds did you face from there? What was it like once it was out in the world?
Yeah. Well, that whole period of like 6 months of building the product and iterating on it was nebulous. That phase is so hard, right? When you have some idea, but you have to like get it to market, the product market fit phase. So we did build a product, and the thesis at that time was that B2B marketers care about measurability a lot. And so we were focused on analytics and integrations and all of that. And as a result of that, our front end looked terrible. So our events looked genuinely terrible. And we were also focusing on the wrong persona. So we were focusing on very small startups. We thought it will be easier to get in with them, and they'll be more open to trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
And after banging ahead on that for 3 months, we realized that that's not going to work because these companies do not have the audience to justify an events program that is recurring in any way.
Okay.
So we decided to change the front end in 6 weeks. That was the whole end-to-end process that was so intense. We worked day in, day out to redesign and then rebuild the whole thing. And while we were doing this, we were also discussing, these companies are raising so much money and we are not getting any traction. Is there something wrong? Should we maybe pivot to just doing the integrations part where we can plug into a Zoom or hop in or whatever and just do analytics and integrations? So that's what they are probably not focused on, and we can make a business on that. So there were suggestions like these, and this came from one of our lead investors actually as a suggestion. And again, we trusted our gut and vetoed it because of some practical reasons as well. So the practical reason was that the ACV will be too small in that market, and you are dependent on a few big players to actually resell you. And also, I just genuinely thought that there is a better product that can be built. That was just pure hubris, probably.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I think that's trusting your gut, honestly.
Yeah. We had a lot of conviction in our gut for that. So we built this product, and then through a sequence of events, it caught the eyes of David Cancel, the CEO of Drift. And once he was speaking at an event that was happening on Goldcast, and he made a comment to the organizer that he liked the experience, and that comment made it to us. And so we hounded him on emails. So my co-founder Kishore, I think, sent him 6 emails.
Oh my gosh, you're like, excuse me, you said something nice about us. I'm going to need you to say that again, please. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. And finally he responded and said, "Oh yeah, I liked it. I can connect you with our team." And so he made the intro, which led to Drift becoming a customer. And that was the actual making of the tailwind, because we went from 0 to 1 million in ARR in 6 months since Drift started doing the event, because they were so popular amongst marketers, right? Everyone started seeing, oh, this is a new platform which looks cool. Drift is doing it, so we should emulate, and that gave us a lot of momentum, a lot of early momentum.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. Okay, so I want to dig into some of that moment. It wasn't a moment. I'm sure it felt like an eternity, but where you're trying things, you're not getting the traction that you think you should. You realize you're not reaching the right people, and you're at that point that every founder gets to a billion times, where it's like, okay, we've got to start making some decisions, and suddenly there are hundreds of voices telling you, well, you should do, and you can't do this, and you should do this, and like, you're never going to get there if you don't do that. And of course, well, obviously you're going to do this, and you know what you need to do? You need to hire someone. You know what you need to do? You just need to hire like 15 people as a sales team. And you should probably change your pricing and packaging. And have I've got a person I need to introduce you to that should run your go-to-market. And it's like, and I don't know about you, but that happens a lot. And it's all based on somebody else's lived experiences, which cool, but that's great. But you've got to find a way to filter and to say, that's good advice, that's terrible advice, this is interesting advice, but I need to change it, like I need to apply it to my own situation. And I don't think that people talk enough about discernment. And in those moments, which happen all the time, being able to discern what's good advice, what's applicable, what's not, and it changes. Again, you can get exceptional advice from somebody at one moment, and in the next situation, they're going to be terrible advice, because again, their lived experiences are just different. And so, what does that look like for you? Like, how do you discern what is applicable, what is good for you and for Goldcast as things continue to change?
Oh, that's a great question, Lindsay. I wish I had a great answer, but I have an operational answer to this, actually. So we definitely get a lot of advice, and I actually love advice. So that's one of the reasons I always find ways to chat with you, because I learn so much from those conversations, and same with other founders. So we love that. One thing which I have learned as a muscle power over time is that we get a lot of advice. We have to filter, and generally something is coming in as a strategy or advice that replaces something that you are already doing or asks you to do things better. And I always question, like, have we tried that enough? Because there's some merit to being persistent on a particular path or a strategy for just enough time. So there's no merit in just continuing banging your head on something which is not working, that we understand. But also sometimes just giving up things too quickly is also not right. So I always evaluate whether it's time to change and it's the right time to change. That's how we make decisions. It is gut based, but there is some framework, some actual framework behind it.
Knowing you and your engineering mind, that surprises me not at all. Like, doesn't surprise me at all. But you're like, well, actually, I have this framework. Okay, and how about, like, looking back, like, at this story as far as we've gotten so far, and the people who told you shouldn't do things, you shouldn't move, you shouldn't get your MBA, you shouldn't. Where do you think that comes from? And, like, how do you work through that? Because I don't know if you think of this, but I think you're very, very brave. Like, you are a very brave person. Like, the things that you've been like, yeah, I'm just going to go do those things. Like, where do you think it comes from? The people in your life that are telling you, like, not to do the things you think you should?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lindsay. I think that is also, that kind of forms the part of what you were saying before. Whose advice you take, and, like, how deep do you dig into that advice is also an important skill that needs to be built. Because often what happens is people you are naturally talking to for advice will be credible people, right? So one of the people I spoke with was another founder of the company that I was working at. So, and he said that this is not a good idea for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And then when I look back at it, I was like, how do I? So he's very credible. He's definitely a great entrepreneur, but how does he know whether this is actually a good idea? Is it just based on, like, a 2-minute conversation? And in the end, I looked at and said, yeah, it's just based on the 2-minute conversation and some things that he has in his mind. It's not built on a real expertise or real insight. So that is how I'm able to discern. Sometimes feedbacks are actually very valid, and we'll come to that story where we took one of those and decided to change, and that's how our paths crossed, right? But generally, yes, I have, in short, stopped getting enamored by the person who's giving the advice, and also, but piecing it in a whole to say, does their advice, given what we know about them, their state, and what we told them, actually has merit, and how much merit does it have?
Exactly. Like, to me, and I don't necessarily do this well, but I think one thing that has served me well in the past is asking why they gave you that advice, right? Sometimes people tell you not to do something because they love you. Like, there are people who care about you, and you're, somebody who means a lot to them, and they're like, I'm scared for you. Like, I'm worried about what's going to happen if you do this thing. Other times it's, well, I did that before. Like, you go to another founder and they're like, well, don't do this because they did that before and it didn't end well for them. Other times, they feel like they know the situation. Like you said, it's based on a 2-minute conversation. And so they're filling in the gaps where you have, somebody called it perfect knowledge to me before. You have perfect knowledge of a situation. They have a glimpse, right? And so they're left to fill in the blanks that with information that may or may not be, probably isn't correct. And so therefore you're skewing your perfect information on something that they've just had a glimpse of. And so I think it's really important. Like you said, I love that you use the word enamored. Like, stop getting enamored with, oh my gosh, this is a big deal person who's done really big things and they told me not to do it. Well, sure, based on their information, you still are the only one who has the complete picture.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard. It can be really difficult to continue to remember that over and over and over, because you're constantly building something new. Like, no one's ever done this before.
Correct. Yes. That is very true. And we have come very close to being too enamored and too influenced by by people, which happened in our next fundraise when we went into our next round, which I can talk about later.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so as we started getting traction, like our name started going out, and this category was still hot. So we got an inbound from Bain Capital at the time, and I was like, "Wow, that sounds awesome." So we'll take the call, and the MD of Bain Capital, he was very interested in investing, and he made it clear from day one. It was not like an exploratory call to learn about. He said, "I'm interested. I want to explore more," and we almost like it went so fast that we did not have a deck to present, but we were having meetings with them. Like I met with them in Cambridge with the MD. We took a 6 feet like social distancing walk with him for almost an hour.
Still in the days of social distancing. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then we even had a partner meeting, which you know what it is, right? Like all of the partners.
That's like you're real close when you have like the partner meeting with it. Yep. Mm-hmm. So you were like
exactly.
up to the line, kind of expecting it to happen. Yeah.
Very much expecting it, just given. And we started ramping up our burn also. So we hired a bunch of people based on the signals. And we did not have a formal fundraising process that was going on. It was all up in the air, just reactive conversations.
And then suddenly people will tell you, and I don't know if they told you this, but when that happens, when it happens to you, everyone around you, like you kind of threw it in there, like we hired a bunch of people.
Yes.
In this conversation right here that we're recording, people can be like, what? You hired a bunch of people because we're having conversations? No. When you're a founder and you're in it and you've never done this before, and that fundraise happens to you with a big name like Bain, everyone around you will tell you, this is good, this is good, this is good. You better go. You're never going to get to where you want to go if you don't start right now.
Yeah.
It's huge. Like I can't. Yes. I understand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that pull is irresistible, especially when there was a land grab going on in our market. So we had customers coming in and saying, "Oh, build me this like Pardot integration," and we don't have people to do it. So it was hard to resist hiring more people and just going after the opportunity.
Everyone around you is telling you to do it. Everyone.
Yes.
Yep.
Everyone.
Okay, carry on.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so our burn has increased in a matter of a month, and then Bain came and suddenly said we are passing because they had insider information that Anthony Canada is joining Hopin, and Hopin is raising a $250 million round. So that scared us. That genuinely scared us. We knew Anthony because he was at some other company, but he had been at Gainsight. And so everyone knows Anthony, right? He's
so
a force
great.
of nature, and he's so great. He's so great. We have learned so much from him. But because he is who he is, and the $250 million round, that scared the folks at Bain. That scared us as well, and they said they're passing. And then as soon as they passed, like everyone else passed. So because everyone was like, okay, Bain is passing, then they're definitely good at it. So they must have seen something that we are not seeing. And so we were suddenly left with no good conversation and 6 months of runway.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And those 2-3 weeks were pretty stressful, but we finally managed to get attention of Unusual Ventures, and Sandhya, who's the partner, she was the head of marketing at Amplitude. So she understood this market very well. And so she took a bet at that time. They led our seed round, which came together after that. So HubSpot also participated. Everyone participated in that round, but that was a real shake in our confidence in general.
Yeah, I'd say so. But they always say, and like I hate hearing it in the moment, but it's so true. Like all it takes is one.
Yes.
Like you are a beat away from somebody being like, yeah, let's do this, and you're like, huh? Okay, here we go again. So okay. Cool. So Unusual Ventures comes in their unusual way and happened quickly. Sounds like it came together fast. So that's good.
Yes, it happened very quickly. So we spoke with them, and then within 2 weeks, they gave us a term sheet.
Wow. That's amazing. Very, very cool. Okay. So that was your seed round. Let's keep going. So you keep chugging along.
We keep chugging along. And so this is March of 21, April of 21, when we got the term sheet. And then we keep on growing from there. And this was still our first year in operations, right? So we ended up at a good number. Everything was looking good.
Sure.
The market kept pumping money in competition.
Yep.
And then in 22, you would remember that time. Every founder remembers that time. In this
I'd
time,
like
actually,
to not
there was another.
remember that time.
Oh, yes.
But yeah.
I know. This was also so there was another complication because of the way we got our visa. I went to India in between and got stuck there because we didn't have the right stamps, etc. So for almost 8 months, I was working from India in EST hours, which is, I was burning the midnight oil. And
literally.
Yes, literally burning the midnight oil. And it started taking a toll on my, I'm a night owl, but it started taking a toll on my health a little bit. So,
well, yeah, and you're a father, so you have a kid and a wife. They were there with you, I'm assuming.
Yes, they were there with me in the background.
Okay.
So but things were going well, and I said, okay, this is enough. I need to figure something out. So I put whatever effort I could, and finally got an appointment, got a visa, and then I came here. And this was the time when this was like Q1 of 2022. So market was still hot, but there were inklings of an upcoming.
Yeah, there were some indicators that something was coming, especially in the space that we were in. I was at Cast at the time. So marketing technology, SaaS, marketing technology, marketing budgets, especially in new technology in spaces where we were. So it was like SaaS, MarTech, new technology for MarTech for a new way of thinking about content and B2B marketing. Yes. We saw it first. Like, first.
Exactly.
Everybody else was like,
first.
No, I'm doing that. My pipeline's great. And people in our land were like, things are not how they were.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
Yes, exactly. And I also started thinking at that time that this cannot go on forever. Like, you cannot be raising at 100x every 6 months. That there's something wrong. And so in Jan, we were getting a lot of emails from investors from all types of VCs that, hey, we want to chat about you for your Series A. And I was like, okay, this is good. So we had a quasi board meeting. We didn't have a formal board at that time. And the suggestion we got was, this was Feb, that, wait for 4 more months, just go through one cycle of retention, show some improvement, etc., and then raise. And I almost took that suggestion, but then I said, no, we cannot do it. I spoke to a couple of investors, and one thing I noticed is that we started getting almost no inbound suddenly, and the stock market is crashing all of a sudden. So I decided to just unilaterally start a fundraise, and I was here it's unbelievable now. I stayed in Sheraton here in Boston downtown for 2 months, and it was $100 a day. So,
oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes. This was COVID. COVID was ending. People were not traveling. So it was cheaper than my apartment.
That's so funny. Those times have ended. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was holed up there and sort of decided against the board advice to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an incredibly tough fundraise. That was very tough because this time we knew that we cannot just be pulled into a process. So we need to have a process. So we did a proper sales funnel type process, talked to every investor, everyone that we could talk to. And it was very discouraging, very disheartening. Like, people had lost faith in the category. And I think just because the other companies were crashing, they again had no reason to believe that we will also not crash. So we had to go through a lot. And finally, we ended up with 2 term sheets at that time, which both they didn't look great at that time, but one of them looked better. And and we took it. But if I had decided to delay the fundraise by 2-3 months, that would have completely killed the company, because I think we were probably the last major round for a long while in MarTech. And after that, I think the major round was probably, Clay was probably the big round that happened after that. But MarTech,
I actually feel like I remember like flags going up, like, it's back, people are investing again. But it's faucets just turned off for sure.
Yes, faucets turned off in general, but definitely for Series A and definitely for MarTech, as you said, like new technology, MarTech, all of that. So we got that money, and that was that was probably the best gut decision I have made in my life.
Yeah. Kudos to you. So again, another actually I can moment where you have very smart people who care a lot about you, believe in you, have literally invested in you, that are like, just wait until, we get these indicators, and you're like, no, I need to go right now. So think about how different things would be if you had listened.
Yeah.
Okay. So there we go. So that you made it through Series A. And I remember you made some pretty cool moves after that. So tell me about kind of the last couple of years and what that's been like for you and for Goldcast too.
Yeah, absolutely. And see that, that has been my actual life operating as a real CEO. Before that, I was an IC, having a title of a CEO. So now we had a full executive team. We brought on all of the folks that you see on the team right now, and and while we were growing, we had a very good 2022 actually. Even 23, I would say, was pretty good from the benchmarks of other companies. But we could see that investors were probably not fully wrong. There's definitely some challenges in the category, but we understood what that challenge was. So what we were going after was, in very clear terms, the webinar and digital events software budget. And as the dust settled in the market, it became clear that this category is probably like 800 million to 1 billion in ARR, but no growth and no remaining tailwind. So now and in all brownfield, so everyone has something, right? Everyone has something. And also you have to replace people. And we understood that in this economy, it's insane to build a rip and replace motion that can give you venture growth. So we started seeing cracks in that, and that's when this whole idea that we are exploring right now came about. So before, I think in that time, we started getting a lot of advice that, hey, everyone is going back in person. Why don't you build in-person tech? And that was an advice we sort of took. And for almost 3/4 of period, we played in this hybrid event space, which was, you would remember, up in the air at that time. A lot of people were doing it. And then we realized that this hybrid event thing is not real. And it does not absolve.
Everyone hates it, by the way. Going to a real live event and knowing that it's also live streamed, and going to it, no one's going to sit in their office and watch something that's designed for it's impossible to design an event for both. So yes. I'm glad that those days are kind of waning.
Yes. And I'm glad we didn't build all of it, because the tooling for an in-person event is very different. It's very involved, and in-person events market, especially the conferences, etc. That's a great market for everyone except the software, because it's not recurring. So this year you're using X, next year there's a different team that's running the event. There's a different agency. They might bring in their own stuff. It's not a real SaaS market. We realized that very quickly, and just to go back, when we were getting insane number of rejections in the previous fundraise, I started reading about, okay, what else can we do if people are not interested in funding a digital event startup? What can we do? And so I came across a study from Samsung's, some lab in Samsung, an AI lab. And this was before AI was hot. No one knew what OpenAI was, who Sam Altman is. No one knew. So they had a thesis on what they called synthetic media, which is now called generative media, and which had things like what you were doing, but with some bit of AI, right? And that's how I actually got to know about Casted, because I started searching for those keywords, like, hey, how can you edit videos and create snippets for social media. Short form content was hot at that time, and there was not much out there in the market except Casted at that time. So that's how I got to know of Casted, and that thesis was sort of in my head, because that we had always thought of what the next step of the company is. And there were two axes we could build in: the hybrid event axis, which we almost discarded. The other was the video axis, but there was, before AI, there was nothing much you could do except Casted, right? So you could do that kind of product where you could actually operate on a piece of video and create more derivative videos from it, and then you can host it. The hosting market is not that attractive, as you know.
Yep.
So we had doubts there, and And this was the time when we started seeing cracks in our growth, our pipeline started dropping, etc. And so we got into this discussion that, okay, what should we do? And and my co-founder Ashish, he was so we after fundraise we hired a head of engineering to run the team because it had become big, and Ashish is great at thinking and building new things. So he built a prototype of what was early version of our content lab. And we started testing that out, and there was great reception from customers. And we realized that customers who are most successful on Goldcast, they don't treat it as events, they treat it as part of the content supply chain. So those two things came together, but I was very hesitant in actually making it real because of all the advice you hear on Twitter and from VCs, everyone, right? That multi-product is a recipe for disaster before 20 million. And so everyone was against it, actually. And in fact, I was also very convinced that we should not become multi-product or not build another product. And there was all this wisdom that existed out there. And at this time, I was lucky that we have Sandhya on our board. She is definitely a great strategist. And so she said, yes, that is true in general, but in your situation, you have to probably do what the gut would, what
go for it.
The wisdom would otherwise say is just go for it. And I thought deeply about it. I said, okay, yeah, we have to go for it because there's no way out of it. It would be too late, or it would be because this whole workflow will become apparent. Content repurposing will become table stakes in 2-3 years, and we cannot enter the market at that time. So we decided to build this as a standalone product, which was insane because it was a self-serve product. We had no PLG DNA in the company. We were all like top-down, BDR, AE, close sales kind of people. We had no good idea of how video content actually works. So there was a lot, and our whole team was thinking, okay, the numbers are looking great, we are growing well, and why do we need to do it? And there's a lot of risk in doing a full positioning change, product portfolio change.
Yeah,
so there was
for sure
incredible amount of pushback from everyone internally as well, from our team. And we were not small enough at that time to just trivially make a pivot. So we had a fully formed executive team, almost 130-ish people in the company.
Yeah, so that's not a small amount of people. That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of people. So there was a lot of pushback. And but by this time, we had decided to do it. So I had to almost push through that for almost 2-3 months, where there was constant questioning back, and the questions would bubble up, and I had to like push that. And since then, I had the pleasure of attending a talk by Brian Halligan here. And he said, you can only do it a few times in your life as a CEO. You can only make these extremely unilateral, unpopular decisions, probably once or twice or thrice in a decade. So I have used my once.
Well, I don't even know. Would you want to do it again? Because it's not fun.
It's not fun at all. So no, probably, hopefully not.
Yeah, but here you are. I mean, you're doing some really cool things with some really cool people. You've trusted your gut. What do you think you've learned? I mean, obviously so many things, but specifically about trusting your gut and about taking advice and about what to listen to and what not to listen to.
So I think that what I have learned, Lindsay, and that has sort of reinforced my belief in this whole process, is that market forces are the biggest determinant of a company's success, right? What market you are playing in, how big that market is, but is there a real tailwind in that market is so important, and that's probably the biggest determinant. Like there was I think an article by Anderson which said that a great market, when it meets a bad team, the market wins. A bad market, when it meets a great team, then also the market wins.
Yeah.
If a great market meets a great team, that's when the magic happens. And we realized that we were not in a great market anymore, and which was a great market before. So I think
it changed so fast.
It changed so fast, and that humility to accept that things have changed and we should change, and it wasn't a great market anymore. I think that realization was very important for us. We had to come to terms with that to make any further decisions. So I treat this as sacrosanct. Like, what are the tailwinds, and how do we ride them as much? So that whole learning, building that muscle was my number one greatest learning. And the second is what I think that the topic of this conversation is, right? At the end of the day, founders have to trust their gut. There are definitely some frameworks. I don't think like a founder can will a market into existence. I think there's one example that everyone gives, which is Airbnb. Probably once in 30 years, something like this happens, but markets get created by a complex force of things. So a founder cannot will it. But besides that, I think a lot of things do ultimately lie on the decision-making of the founder. And a lot of that has to come from trusting the gut, knowing that you know the most about the situation versus anyone else. So that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Easy peasy, no big. Goodness. Cool. Well, I thank you so much for sharing your story. I learned a lot today. What little takeaway of advice do you have for a founder who's just in it?
Yes. And where we are, we talk to a lot of them. I know you also know. Two advice. I think one is that if there have been changes in your market or what you're doing, and it's not as attractive anymore, I think there's a lot of bravery and goodness in accepting that and figuring out what next. Either that's a pivot or moving on. There's definitely a lot of points for perseverance, but there's a very thin line between perseverance and for the lack of better word, like long-term stupidity. I
was going to say stupidity, but I didn't want to put the word in your mouth. Yeah. Perseverance, brave and courageous and stupid.
Yes.
It's fine.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of bravery and courage in accepting that. And second is, as founders, you have to trust your gut, given you have the most holistic information, and also not be afraid of making unilateral decisions that sort of go against everyone else. That I have seen is definitely a mark of many successful founders. That definitely is not the only determinant. I think the market is the number one determinant. But if you are in a good market, then the decisions you make, trusting your own judgment, is a big determinant.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I always knew you were cool. You're very cool, very friendly, very wonderful person. But man, you are brave. You've done a lot of very cool things, a lot of very strong things. And I think a lot of people would have given up or just been like, it seems like a lot of work. So thank you for sharing that here. You. And and where can people find you in Goldcast?
Yes, I am very active on LinkedIn. So you can always add me, DM me, and I'm very active. And then check out goldcast.io. We have lots of cool things brewing.
Cool. Agreed. Cool. Well, thank you. And we'll catch you later.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Actually, I Can. And did you know that actually you can subscribe so that you never miss an episode? Yeah, do it now. And you can also go to actuallyican.show and watch any episode anytime. Thanks for joining.